The seagulls follow trawler. It's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much.
Talking nonsense. So I thought, no, enough's enough. Why should I put up with that? Talking nonsense. So I thought, no, enough's enough. Why should I put up with that? Don't back down, double down. Don't back down, double down.
Yes, here we go. It's the Thursday night. What is this? What are you doing here? It's the Thursday night forum, but tonight I'm joined by Monday Club regular and also my brother, Jonathan Boyce. Yes, mate. Are you recovered from the COVID, mate? Have you recovered? You feeling better?
Yes, I'm definitely feeling a lot better. My head is scrambled. It's definitely not Monday. I believe it is indeed Thursday, but looking forward to getting cracked into all things Celtic over the past few days. It's certainly been a bit more eventful than my bed-bound illness, Russell.
Well, that's it, mate. That's it. The tattoo face. His yin and yang must be a wee bit out, Jonathan. He's already noticed. I'm on the right-hand side. I kind of face that way. I don't actually know how I keep ending up on the right-hand side. I've given too many folk keys to this bus. Everyone's got the login, I think, now.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Anyway, who cares? What a week it has been. Unfortunately, defeat again in the Champions League last night, Jonathan. It wasn't the best performance at the weekend either. But of course, it's still better to be a Celtic fan than support anyone else. Of course it is. Are these players able to be critiqued, Jonathan Boyce? Is the manager allowed to be critiqued? We're going to find out in the next hour. We will also, as always, be handing the keys to you guys, particularly for the second half hour of tonight's show, because we are wanting the input from the viewers. It's called the Thursday Night Forum for a reason. It's when we hand the keys to you, you get your points in, we discuss them. Sound like an original format? Nah, me neither. But before we get started with all that, please, if you've not already, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the share button. And if you want to become a Bhoycie Bus member, you can do. It's all that good stuff. Yes, Jonathan. And I don't know, I've not shown you this, mate, right? But I've got a new toy. Well, Phil built as a new toy for the bus, right? So, just when it comes up in conversation, expect the unexpected. It's not really that flash, but it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant.
It's genius.
I just told them you hadn't seen it. I was trying to make it all. Blew my cover. Yeah, we showed it earlier. Cheers for that, mate. But Jonathan, it was 3-1 in Leipzig in Germany. Not quite the Eredivisie with the Edenjeppels. This was in Deutschland. Ich liebe dich Land, Jonathan. And what a way to say I love you. Like in Italian, and that's like ti chiamo. You know, Germany, ich liebe dich. But anyway, they took us to school a wee bit last night, George. It was another open-ended match. What were your takeaways from our latest Champions League setback?
Yeah, it was an interesting one going into it. I didn't actually have overly high expectations, to be honest, after what kind of happened to the back line ahead of it, without having our two first-choice centre-backs. For me, certainly Carter Vickers was a huge loss. And I do feel Starfelt's probably his best option to play alongside them as well. So I kind of felt we were going into it very weakened at the back.
Yep.
I wasn't overly convinced with the performance on Saturday either, with aspects of it. So I have to say I went in there fearing the worst. It maybe didn't turn out quite as badly as I first feared. I felt Celtic did rise to the challenge in patches of the game, much like they have in the other games they've played in the Champions League. And I kind of felt they were well and truly in the match. And again, it came down to the possibility of not taking chances when they were coming our way, and then we ended up conceding some absolutely silly goals. The first one, Callum McGregor, he just has to take the man down. I'm sorry if you're looking at that from years gone by.
3 days ago. I don't get it.
I know that's he had no hesitation in getting himself sent off for the greater good on Saturday, but then that was just going to be a yellow card, and you've got to think,
Jonathan,
back when Scott. Yeah.
See, just before we get you in your role on last night, see, just quickly now, I'm thinking about it. Is that maybe a sort of like microscopic example of the mentality shift when Celtic go into Europe? Like the things that you would do naturally domestically aren't quite there yet. That swagger or that, because domestically Callum McGregor knows he gets booked, it's fine. In Europe, why is he not thinking the same way to do that, particularly with such a recent example?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there is a mentality problem that Celtic need to address in the Champions League, and I think that only comes from experience, which is why I think it's going to be a bit of a longer process than perhaps one campaign is going to give us at this level. I think we need to be consistently playing in this so that the players get that sort of savviness, if you like, because the game can pass you by at 100 miles an hour if you're not smart. Although, having said that, Callum McGregor is actually one of the few players that does have experience in the Champions League, and you would probably expect him to have pulled them down. And I think if you're looking back on it, the guy he used to play alongside the last couple of times we've been in the Champions League, Scott Brown, would have had no hesitation in bringing the boy down there. Scott Brown would have taken the booking every day of the week and twice on a Sunday, and because he does have that bit more savviness, I think, with McGregor.
Bruni takes him down, not just because it's the streetwise thing to do, Jonathan, because he'd be raging at his honking first touch as well.
Aye, and he'd probably swagger off delighted with his little yellow card as well, probably peacock away.
But do you know what I mean? It's like that first touch. Surely you're feeling frustrated because Calmac, as we've spoke about before, he can take the ball in a phone box, Jonathan. His first touch is brilliant. Suddenly you see him take a stray one. Surely he's raging enough. Almost frustration would lead you to doing that foul, if not being as savvy as what we would expect. But I do feel that is such a brilliant example of that one, Jonathan, because, and you're right to mention someone like Scott Brown. Scott Brown definitely there. He takes the yellow card every day of the week. He knows it's a yellow. He doesn't turn back. The referee's giving him the yellow card. He's smiling. He's just running back going, I know I took one for the team. I don't understand where Calmac's not done that. And I mean, obviously right now, we're just promoting making a foul. I know this isn't total football we're promoting right now, but it's just, it's that level of being a wee bit streetwise. We're lacking a wee bit. Do you know what I mean? And it's that, I think it was such a poignant example where Calmac has done this domestically. We know it's in his locker. So why is the brain not working the same way in Europe, Jonathan? That's what I want to know. And if it ain't working for Calmac, as you say, has a lot of European experience for Celtic already under his belt, how's the rest of them going to be?
Yeah, and I think that's the question that we need to address is we need to get that, psychological mindset changed amongst the players, because McGregor should know to just take him out. I don't know why he hasn't done it. I think there is almost a moment where he thinks about it. I think he does get his hand up at one point and he thinks better of it, McGregor. So there is that moment where he does kind of clock, maybe I should, and then he doesn't. Which is just, he hesitates, and I don't know if he's just thinking, I don't know, I think I can maybe get back here in time, or if he's just, I don't know what he's doing, because for me it's obvious when he has that natural instinct and he puts the hand up, just do it, drag him
Do it.
in. Doesn't always have to be nice, pretty football. And Cal McGregor is one of our tidiest footballers with the ball at his feet. But at the same time, sometimes you just have to be willing to take the fouls in games like this, where you are up against players that are of an outstanding quality when you're playing in the Champions League. So I think with that one, it was definitely a case that McGregor just needed to take the foul and take his booking, and would have recovered. I mean, moving on from that, we didn't do as bad as I thought. I thought, once we conceded, it could have been similar to the other games where we completely folded a little bit for the next 5 to 10 minutes. I felt we didn't do too badly. We kept ourselves in the game. The goal we get is actually a fantastic goal. Rio Tati's the first ball. When he sees that, it's just a joke, to be honest. It's a joke. It's as good as anything you'll see in the Champions League group stages for a pass to unlock that Leipzig defence.
You could argue, Jonathan, that was a pass he would make domestically, even just the same bravery.
Yeah, so I think Hatati's proven to me as one of the few that have really stepped up in most of the Champions League games. I've been pretty impressed with Rio in pretty much every single one of them. I think he's been one of the standout players for us, to be completely honest, so far in this campaign. And then Kyogo shows great composure, because it's very easy for him when he's not had too many chances to potentially want to have a go himself. Picks out the right ball for Jota, and it's a very composed finish, a very enjoyable goal, that one to have actually got. But then I think that's where it all seemed to go wrong for me, Russell. I thought once we got back to one each, it seemed as if the players almost decided to take a step back. They were still leaving a lot of space. So it was almost like a case that there was a mentality shift that they wanted the point, but they were still obviously wrestling with Ange's philosophy of going for the win. And they ended up in a bit of no man's land with their shape, because they were giving away so many chances, and they were just, creating so much space there. But I think Ange Postecoglou and his mind must have been thinking, fucking go for it. This is our chance to try and get ourselves in front. And then maybe them will try and be a bit more pragmatic. But I think naturally the players, I think because they've got themselves level, were almost didn't fully believe that they could then go on and push on for the win. And it was almost a case of, well, a draw's a great result here. And we're going to naturally, I think, subconsciously almost come back. But at the same time, they're thinking, well, it's not really what we should be doing. So they're trying to go forward. And then they ended up just leaving a lot of spaces, which Leipzig inevitably exploited, because they're a quality team at the end of the day.
Was there an irony, Jonathan, that a team almost becoming notorious, i.e. Celtic, in the Champions League so far for not taking their chances, take their chance in the first couple of minutes of the second half, and then don't create another one?
Yeah, I mean, it's strange. It's just,
surely that would encourage you to be like, dude, I don't know. It was frustrating, that bit of it. And I agree. There seemed to be, despite the fact we were creating nothing, still this openness to our play. Midfield seems wide open. RB Leipzig, time and time again, felt like they had 2 versus 1. I don't know what the script was there. I'll let you carry on with the analysis, but I'm just interjecting as we go blow by blow, mate.
Yeah, no, sure. And then I think, we're kind of hanging on in there. I think Leipzig, the goal that they actually get that's ruled out for VAR probably should have stood. I didn't really see much wrong with that at all. I think it's actually a brilliant strike, and no way Joe Hart's saving that with the boy that's in the offside position. So I felt we got away with one a little bit there. And then just to compound the frustration from a Celtic point of view, thinking maybe this is going to be our night. You begin to start almost thinking maybe we're going to get the rub of the green. That was the second VAR decision that went in our favour in the match. And granted, the first one was marginally offside. I felt the second one we were a little bit more fortunate with. But then we get the opportunity there to kind of continue to push on and keep it at 1-1. And after getting such a reprieve, we just go and give. Yeah, we go and give them the ball straight away from the bloody free kick. And I just couldn't believe what I was watching, and they just end up scoring anyway. And you're like, well, what was the point in all of that? It's just like you've literally just been given such a reprieve, and then you just went and chucked it in anyway. And it was just so Celtic and away from home in Europe. It was just like, I feel like I've seen this script so many times before. And no doubt Joe Hart will come in for a lot of criticism as a result of that. And I think he needs to do better. And I think he has accepted responsibility for his part in that. And then I think from that moment on, I never really felt we were going to get back to
It's
2
only
each.
2-1 though. But I agree with
I
you.
know. I know.
I agree.
kind of
I
felt
didn't feel we were going to get back to 2-2.
No, it was one of those ones that just kind of felt like it was always going to peter out. The players weren't really creating anything, as we've said, after we got back to 1 each. You never really felt they were going to have it in them to lift themselves off the canvas again after going to 2-1. It needed to finish 1 each for us, or we need to hit them on the break if we were going to win that game at 1-1. As soon as it went to 2-1, you kind of felt the writing was on the wall. And I think the third goal was quite well worked, to be fair to them. But, I think they would have seen the game out quite comfortably, even at 2-1. Substitutions wise, wasn't overly thrilled with the substitutions. I kind of felt they were just likes for likes substitutions. I didn't feel they were really going to be game changing options. So I appreciate he didn't have his full strength bench available, with Abada being unavailable for religious reasons. But guys like James Forrest's race has well and truly been run in a competition like this. He barely plays domestically, so to expect him to do any sort of damage in a game like this, I'm just shaking my head, to be honest, when I'm seeing him coming on and thinking. And I've liked Forrest for a long time. I think everyone will wish him well whenever his time is up at Celtic, but his days of being a Champions League impact player for us are long gone. And I just kind of felt even guys like Giacomakis needed to get on earlier to kind of give us a chance at getting back into it. But it seemed like there was a little bit of reluctance there to really switch things about, and a lot of it was just like for like changes that I didn't feel were going to impact the game at all.
Well, Jonathan, I think you've given a very good account in the opening salvo of the show today of what you've seen yesterday. Now, that's just opinion on the match itself, so far, and each sort of the key moments, what we made of them, and yeah, I mean, I felt it was a bit of a disappointing night in the end, I'll be completely honest. Now, there's a couple of ways we can measure that, Jonathan. I think we've got a couple of camps now that we can look at, and that's all good debate, unless it's on social media. But I think it's all good debate, Jonathan. I think it's fair debate when you look at it and you go, well, have our expectations almost unrealistically increased because of how brilliant a job Ange's done so far? We're expecting more than 1 point from our first 3 games in the Champions League. His first ever Champions League campaign, first time he's ever managed at this sort of level, particularly club-wise. And obviously with a budget, with a club that has £30 million in the bank, and I don't know, spent whatever they did this summer. We can look at that in many different ways. Or is there an argument that some of these players that we've heralded at the start of this season as being world beaters maybe will need to improve on again to compete in the Champions League, which I think will be the case for a few, Jonathan. I think that's called evolution, by the way. That's not a critique. Yeah. It's not a personal hang on the fucking player. It's just going, we need to go one better again. I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't see any manager in the world that doesn't want to constantly improve their team. And then again, is it, Jonathan, that at this competition, we have to play the fixture a wee bit more? Is there an aspect where perhaps there's different ways and means, or are we right now bowing to one strategy, one style, a wee bit of stubbornness from the manager? I think these are all debates. I'm not, my personal opinion on them all is kind of a wee bit of all of them, to be honest with you. But I think they've all got validity in what they're saying. It doesn't mean you're going down one road, but George, what we've learned, yet again, I mean, it's not like we've just learned it for the first time, is after a very disappointing performance at the weekend, any critique of this certain Celtic team seems to be, and I think it is particularly, I'm going to sound like fucking Neil Lennon here, but it seems to be particularly from the young generation now. They can't handle it. You can't basically, on Twitter, for example, put up a post saying someone's decent, but they're not actually as good as being made out. You can't say, which is hardly, I mean, folks, you can't rip into him like that. I mean, if that's a tearing into Josip Juranovic, and I don't know what it is, I think he is a decent player. I do not think he's of the levels of legendary status almost that he's getting put upon. And I feel that maybe with the team this year, we're seeing as the competition's got harder, as we knew it would, And we discussed many times on this bus, it's about to go up a few rungs in the ladder, you know. And now I just feel some of these guys that just let them become these heroes. You know, I don't remember all these players back in the day. And Jonathan, you know, I remember Martin O'Neill's first season, for example.
Oh, the Martin O'Neill. Send the Martin O'Neill flag, son.
I just missed it. Where is it? There we go.
Oh,
So Jonathan, I remember, for example, back in the Martin O'Neill day.
Oh, it gets better every time you see it.
It's just
Oh.
But I just don't know that always, like, the ability in Europe seemed to go for him. His second season at the club was Champions League. Now, yes, did he have realistically more equitable money to spend? Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. He could compete more by having a few £6 million players in there than what Ange's got. But again, he got 9 points from that group, Jonathan. And I think as well, at times then, there was styles and knowing what to do. And I think there was a frustration I was seeing anyway, with some of the fans thinking, well, that's not quite what. Like, you talk about the Joe Hart incident. Joe Hart comes out after and says, well, that's how the manager wants us to play. And I love it, by the way. He kind of sort of saved himself a bit. But his immediate answer was to sort of say, well, that's what the manager wants us to do. Is it common sense all the time to be doing that? Are Celtic bowing to what Angie's theory is? And are we right now in a 2022 era, Jonathan, where none of these boys can be given the fair critique that all Celtic fans and all fans of any club should be entitled to give when they bat their team all the time? You should be able to go, you know, don't think he's on form right now. I would take him out and put him in. This is conversations we are all entitled to have as supporters, and it doesn't mean you are, you know, baiting for their blood. Do you know what I mean? You're not doing that, Jonathan. You're just giving honest opinion. I've never known a team, Jonathan, that has had this sort of almost protective blanket over it by the support. I can remember, and I stole this with Phil in the group chat earlier, but the Brendan Rodgers here, you look back at that, 69 games unbeaten. I can remember during those 69 games, Jonathan, particularly the second half, playing too slow, no passing the ball quick enough, not moving quick enough. I don't remember a big outcry to that then. But yeah, if you were to say Ange's playing too open in the Champions League, a competition, you can't have it both ways. You can't say you've not got the players to this ability, you've not got the tools, all these guys were missing, he had to use those, and then also say, but we can only play one way. Somewhere there has to be some critique here, Jonathan. And bizarrely, it doesn't feel comfortable doing that in certain social media brackets. Not that fucking we lose any sleep over that, but you know where I'm coming from. It just seems a bit odd to me.
Yeah, I would agree. I think social media has taken a bit of a turn in recent years. It certainly can be a place where if you have an opinion which doesn't agree with the popular opinion, if you like, then you can get lynched on for that. Which I think that there is just a bit of a mentality there. I don't know where that's crept in. Whereas I think before there was a lot more freedom of expression and people were kind of allowed to have more of an opinion without having to worry about pylons and things like that, which does seem to be more of a regular occurrence now than they used to be. But if you're looking at where Ange is with his team, I think, you know, he's going to try and play it his way. I think the way he's wanting to try and assess and get his team playing, I think you have to give him this campaign and then you take stock at the end of it and see where we're at. I think if we're just going to try and chop and change it all the time, the players aren't going to try and learn and adapt to his style at the highest level. By the way, I think it's going to take more than 3 games to get this Celtic team up to the sort of levels that he's wanting to aspire to get them to in the Champions League. I'm seeing signs of decent progress with the ball, with more confidence with the ball at our feet, I think, than we've shown even under Brendan in a lot of games in the Champions League. I think Celtic have looked, you know, as if they belong there this season, which I think was always a question mark we had, is would Celtic just be the whipping boys in the group? And granted, they've taken a few beatings, but we should have beat Shakhtar in Poland. I still think that'll come back and bite us come the end of the campaign. I thought that was a very impressive performance. I think Real Madrid was always going to be unlikely to yield a result, just given their quality and their fact they are Real Madrid, and they're going to do that to any team pretty much. They can pretty much do something like that to what they did to us. But we were still very much in that game for 45, 50 minutes, and we gave them a good run for their money there.
Yep.
And then last night, I kind of felt Celtic weren't at their strongest as a squad. And at the Champions League level, Celtic need to have their best players available. Because I think what we're finding out is that the players, some of the players that are having to fill in, are probably not quite at that level yet, which is totally understandable. I think you'd probably find it was the same, even going back, maybe not so far as the Martin O'Neill era, but if you were going back to Strachan or Lenny's time in charge. We love that, Claxon. If you were to take, Gordon Strachan didn't have good centre backs, for example. Let's just say, you had Gary Caldwell and Stephen McManus were both out for him. I don't even know who his bloody sub ones were. If they were the bloody first choice too, then Christ, the options further back must have been even worse. So I think that makes a big difference. For playing in games like that, I think having like.
Is it making a difference to how we play? Or I suppose this is when it comes down to it, because Charles Sweeney comes in and goes, "We've still got 2 home games left," which he's right. We played Real Madrid, 2 away games. It's a pretty difficult opening 3 games. Leipzig, Shakhtar were the 2 you'd earmarked as home wins, aren't they? They are the 2 games you'd earmarked as home wins. Play like we did first half against Real Madrid. And sustain it for longer, obviously, against both Leipzig and Shakhtar. And who knows? That could be 6 points. And I love that way of thinking. But for me, at times, this is probably where the issue is. Because I think that home game against Real Madrid, see the way we played first half, was like a team that knew if we get beat, it's not going to make any odds, right? And that's fine. Yeah. So we could play with that freedom. Away from home against Shakhtar, we played with that freedom. Couldn't get the opportunity, couldn't take the opportunities, then shat the bed towards the end of the first half. Second half, grew into the game again, very, very strong, I felt. I probably should have won that game. Leipzig, really unsure of that display at times. I didn't really get it at times, to be honest with you. That's just my take. But he's right when you think about the way we'll be able to analyse this properly will be, obviously, once those 2 games are played, Jonathan. However, the thing is, Celtic, and our opinion on them, is always a moving thing, Jonathan. It never sits still. You don't just sit and go off. I love it when people say, "Oh, look at the bigger picture." If Ange lost the next 6, 7 games in a row, he'd be sacked, for example. No one would be thinking about bigger pictures then. Yeah. So it's always a moving thing. And what the beauty we've got as fans is, we get to judge on a game-by-game basis because that's what we look forward to all week. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're buzzing about. So I think it's only fair if we say, Joe Hart, is he out of form? He makes a mistake. Juranovic, is he out of form? It's not really booting them in the balls that hard, is it, Jonathan? It's just honest opinion.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think every sport has that right to turn around and say what they feel after a game. If they're hurting and they're feeling players haven't performed, then I think it's fair that they are allowed to give criticism, just like they'll give plenty of praise when things have went well over the past 12 months, like they have on so many occasions. And I think maybe that's why it's a little bit different for a lot of people just now, is because it's probably the first bumpy spell Celtic have had under Ange in quite a while. I think even the Scottish Cup semi-final defeat wasn't seen as bad because of the fact that we're in such a commanding league position. And by that point, other than the fact it cost us the treble, even then, I don't think it was quite as ropey as it is now, in terms of not just results, but performances haven't quite been as strong in the last couple of weeks as they were before the break. And so I think that is something that needs to be considered. I still think with Celtic, we're actually in a pretty positive place. I still feel in Germany we played okay in spells, and I think Leipzig are a pretty solid team. To be fair, I don't think we can turn around and just expect to be beating a team of that ilk in their own backyard. I think we did.
No,
do
that's fair.
I think we did do fairly well for large spells in the game. I think, given the fact we had a couple out, I know you're saying in terms of the way that Celtic play, it maybe wouldn't have changed if even we had our strongest 11 available to us. But I certainly feel it breeds a bit more confidence in the team having guys like Carter Vickers in the back line. I don't think there's as many gaps coming through the shape if you've got guys like Carter Vickers available. I think he's essential for us at that level because you need solid centre halves. I'd actually have him probably as the second most important player after Callum McGregor for Celtic in the Champions League at the moment. So it'll be very interesting because I think next week, Carter Vickers will be back. Obviously, a home game against Leipzig next week. We've shown we can damage them. I think one of the most pleasing things I quite like about midweek as well was the fact the press worked. They didn't like getting pressed. Those defenders for Leipzig and the goalkeeper, they didn't like getting pressed. The goalkeeper ends up coming off injured because he ends up rushing a clearance. So we should actually probably score from if Hatate has a bit more composure.
Well, that's one aspect. I think, Jonathan, let's move on to, and we're going to take the comments that we're in the second half hour. So get your points in, and I am happy to discuss anything. And we're not all here to agree, Jonathan. We're here to debate them. That's the fun of the Bhoycie Bus. There's no one's right, no one's wrong. It's all about different opinions. I feel, though, for that game at home, we've got a right good chance, Jonathan, because I think they're a team of two halves. Not a game of two halves. I think they're a team of two halves. And it so might turn into a game of two halves for them if we can get that stronger head-to-head against them, which I think we would need to, which would have effectively be goal difference, I'm sure. But I think they're there for the taking at the back. I think when we were pressing like we were at the start of the season, we were seeing in games, even against Real Madrid that first half, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like it's been as intense. I think they were there to be taken. I think the press it was better at times in the first half, Jonathan, midweek, but I still don't think we've got back to where we were from that Real Madrid game in between. I'm not sure what you make of that.
I think it's going to be a tough one, to try and get back to those levels ahead of the Leipzig game that's coming up. So I think from our point of view, we're going to have to try and find a way to play better. I think St Johnstone away offers an opportunity on Saturday for us to find a bit of form because I don't think St Johnstone are going to be one of the stronger teams in the domestic league this season. So that could be a confidence booster, potentially, for Celtic, if they approach it correctly and don't do what they did against St Mirren. If they approach that game properly, then I could see that being a possibility for Celtic to build a platform ahead of Tuesday. I think that game's going to be very important. And then I think they need that because I think they just need a bit more confidence breeded into them. And, results breed confidence, performances breed confidence. And I think St Johnstone away is a potential game where Celtic could, if they hit the sort of form that they were playing with at the start of the season, they could hit St Johnstone for 5 or 6. But it's not really been there for a few weeks now. So I think that game is going to be very important for Celtic to get themselves back up to speed. I think on next week when we play Leipzig, it's going to be very important from the fans' point of view that the fans are on side with them from the first minute, which I know they will be. But they might need to stick with them if things don't go their way in the first 15, 20 minutes. Celtic are renowned for whirlwind starts. They will try and start that game against Leipzig 100 miles an hour. Of that, I'm absolutely convinced. I think everyone knows that's how Celtic will try and approach that game. But if it doesn't yield an early goal, the fans are going to have to play their part and making sure that they don't get overly frustrated because, again, it's going to be a difficult game. I think Leipzig have certainly been proven that we can beat them at home. I felt we've done enough in Germany to make me feel that we can take them at home. As you rightly say, the pressing, I think the Germans, I'm not sure they have answers for all of that. I don't think their defence looks quite as strong as some might think. I think they can definitely be got at. I don't know how long their goalkeeper is going to be out for, so they might be stuck with their sub-keeper as well. So that offers another opportunity because he wasn't tested. Yeah, he wasn't tested enough. So I think there is a lot of things to be positive about from a Celtic point of view. For me, if you're asking how we go about improving on the team's mentality, then I think we look at St Johnstone and we look to try and make a real statement there in the league. And then that sets us up for next week.
I like that. We're going to go with the first point from the passengers. It's Charles Sweeney. Good to have you in the bus, Charles. Welcome aboard, mate. Is it a coincidence that our performances have dropped since Cameron Carter-Vickers and Starfelt have been out? I mean, from my point of view, Jonathan, I think undeniably the omission of Carter-Vickers in the last couple of games has been massive. I mean, I think maybe even doing more of a job than we realised for that sort of back five, if you like, including the keeper, than what we were even aware of, despite the fact we were giving him loads of plaudits last year as well. I definitely think he's obviously a silent sort of operator. He's not someone you always see, galvanising the midfield, but he must be doing a hell of a lot more talking than we're privy to, or we're seeing, whether it be in your seat at the ground or on television, because definitely it doesn't seem to be like they're always, as I don't know, in tandem with each other. That's the way I would describe it. Now, for Jens, I think Jens is now, well, there's two ways. You could say he's been exposed because he's not playing with such a Rolls Royce as Cameron Carter-Vickers, or you could say Jens is new to the club and having to guide someone through their Champions League debut when he's only making his second appearance or third appearance in the competition now is maybe a bit of a tough ask when he's at a new club. So there's two sides to that one. Would it have been better had it been Starfelt and Welsh? I always got the vibe it is Starfelt and Cameron Carter-Vickers, more of the leader anyway, would have been CCV than Starfelt. So I don't know. Would Starfelt have been a good mentor had it been him and Welsh? I'm not sure. But then you've got the argument, Jens and Starfelt, maybe they'd have done okay together. I don't know. And that's not me giving Welsh pelters, by the way. And guys that have came in for money, i.e. 6 million Cameron Carter-Vickers, 4 million Starfelt, Jens alone with an option for probably 4 or 5 million. Like, there's more of an onus on them, I would imagine, to be the sort of alpha centre-back, if that makes sense, Jonathan. But we definitely are missing Cameron Carter-Vickers. I mean, obviously, this is one of the things you need to deal with as a squad, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things we said it with, pre-season that there's going to end up being injuries. You're going to end up with players out, and we'd identified that we probably wanted another centre half in even after we got Carter-Vickers. The Celtic did go out and get Jens in to play that role. I think the jury's still very much out on Jens. I think he did look very promising when he's played with Carter-Vickers, but not so much when he hasn't. But I guess in fairness then, you could possibly argue it's the same for the other centre-halves as well. And I think that all comes back to the fact that Carter-Vickers breeds confidence in all of them. So I think, if you're looking at taking him out, he's a key cog in this Celtic wheel. He's one of the most important players in that starting 11. And I think perhaps we were taking him for granted a little bit, but we certainly aren't now. And, it's for me, it's not a coincidence at all that the performances haven't quite been the same level without Carter-Vickers there, because he just brings so much more confidence to the whole back line.
I think that's fair. We're just going to move on to one of the next comments and see what everyone else is saying, Jonathan. This is what the Thursday Forum is about. You get your points into his. Egyptian King comes out again. Egyptian, regular on the bus, mate. Awesome. Appreciate it. Winning in Europe tonight showed us how it was done. His ammonia team took Man United to the limit. Now, I knew someone was going to bring up the inevitable when it comes to Neil Lennon's sort of European adventure that he's on. I tell you what, he did an amazing job getting them in that competition. 2 convincing 2-0 wins against Ghent, with a fraction of the budget, financial disparity. And then at Man United gave them an awfully scare tonight, Jonathan. Neil Lennon, though, will 100% be playing the fixture, won't he? He will be playing, his team. It will be horses for courses, mate, and it will be, if we win, we'll win with 30% possession. But there's still a game plan. There's still a strategy. This doesn't make you a bad manager. I've never seen anyone qualify, Jonathan, because of possession stats. I've never seen them.
No.
Yeah, I've never seen any team qualify because of shots on goal. I've only seen goals being the reason you qualify, Jonathan, and scoring more than your opposition. And there is many ways to skin a cat, as I always say. And it's interesting that right now, I just wonder if, yes, We all need to learn under Angie's tutelage. We all need to be part of the evolution. And this is the way, and we'll only learn if we play these best teams the same way we play the other teams, yada, yada. I get all that. But how long can you keep a group of players together at Celtic, Jonathan? How long, realistic, do you keep a squad together when you see that evolution progress into season 3, season 4, without there have been heavy rotation of the personnel by then? And then they need to come in and get up to grips with it. Because this is obviously quite a high demanding style that he's focused on. I mean, obviously Egyptian Kings saying shows that's how it's done. What he's saying is, could there be an argument for, I don't know, adapting a wee bit more in Europe, Jonathan? In games like Leipzig away last night?
Oh, yeah, I think it was one that I think a lot of us might have looked at and thought, particularly given the fact he didn't have his strongest lineup available to him and he was having to play a guy like Welsh, who actually thought I played reasonably well, in fairness to him, given the circumstances. But going into a game like that, you might have thought it might have made more sense to be a bit more pragmatic and protect your centre-half partnership, which we knew was quite weak going into the game. So I think if he'd done something like that, the fans wouldn't have had too many complaints over something like that happening. I think the way that Ange is looking at it on the flip side, though, is if you don't try and play his way in every game, then you're just not going to see the team progress to get to the sort of level where it is actually able to compete. Playing Ange's style of football at that level, if you decide to start chopping and changing it, then it can be a little bit more tricky for the players to then get up to those sort of levels if it's going to take longer, because it's a very much an adaptation for Celtic. It's not something we're used to doing, is trying to play this way at this level. We are a bit more used to doing, what Lennon did with his Cyprus team tonight. And try and hold on in there and try and get a result. Although granted, they've also taken their chances, because I think they lost only 3-2, I think it was, this evening. But Lennon's quite savvy in the way that he'll approach games like that. He'll set his side out to pretty much try and take advantage of whatever scraps they can feed off in games where they are that big underdogs. And in fairness to them, that's a pretty good outing when you're only losing by 1 goal against Manchester United, despite the fact that maybe aren't strong. Yeah, well, that's it.
He's got Brandon Barker in his fucking team, for fuck's sake,
Yeah, I mean, you only have to look as far as how Hearts are getting on tonight against Fiorentina to see it doesn't take a genius to realise that Lennon has done quite well in Europe across the piece of his managerial career, and certainly in big games like this, even when he was Hibs manager, he always used to find ways of beating Brendan Rodgers. I remember when Rodgers was at Celtic, and he certainly liked games against Rangers as well as Hibs manager. So he's definitely, I think Lennon's way of approaching it is almost more of a man management sort of motivational way of doing it. I think Lennon tactically he has ways of doing things, but I think when it comes to trying to play these sort of high intensity press sort of ways of how modern day football is, if you like, or how the best managers like Pep Guardiola want to try and set their teams up, which is what I'm just trying to follow. If you ask me, he's trying to follow what Manchester City do, obviously on a much lower scale in terms of players. I just think if you're going to go down that route and you're going to try and play that way in Europe, then you're going to have to continue to go down that way until it becomes drummed into players and it's second nature for them, because it's very easy for a club like Celtic to go back on themselves and back into their shell in these games. And really, in some ways, if you're going to lose a game of football, you'd rather lose it playing and having a goal than just kind of camping out. You've seen Rangers against Liverpool the other night, and they didn't really create a sniff of a chance. Now, obviously, fair enough, Anfield's not an easy place to go, and I'm sure Postecoglou probably would have still had a go there, and possibly might have got done quite heavily. But I think from his point of view, it's all part of a project. I take your point. You mentioned that, Celtic possibly don't hold on to their players for long enough. And I'd agree with you, generally speaking, the time of a squad is probably about 2 or 3 years at Celtic for holding on to their very best players anyway. However, if you are continually making the Champions League, then that inspires confidence for other players to come in that are at a higher level, provided Celtic continue to progress recruitment-wise, that they can then actually hit the ground running a lot quicker because they're already used to playing in styles similar to what Ange is trying to implement at Celtic just now. So I still feel that if you're willing to give the system a go, and obviously, for me, I'm going to judge it at the end of the campaign and see how successful it's been, rather than take it too much on a game-by-game basis. And then, we take stock of where we're at, and if we think there's signs of progress, then I think we have to keep persevering with it. That's how I would approach it. I think it's just time to try and go for a different approach. And one thing about watching Celtic under Postecoglou was it's never dull. It's never dull in Europe. It is entertaining and it is exciting to watch.
Well, I think that's undeniable. I mean, he's definitely got a philosophy, which I think a lot of these managers, that's their thing. They've got to have an identity, a philosophy, and I get all that. And to be honest with you, let's be honest, his philosophy is good football, Jonathan. A lot of it is exciting to watch. It's swashbuckling. We take it to opposition that we should have no given right to, apparently, but I think we should be doing. And I think he's got the right attitude. It also brings you to the gulf between Scottish football and European football, because I see a lot of the comments coming in just now, and thank you for keeping them coming. This is what makes the shows. And they talk about, Fiorentina, shafting Hearts 3-0 right now. A lot of celebratory comments about that. I mean, the gulf right now between SPFL level and Champions League is fucking night and day. So the adaptation period, the adaptation sort of gulf to play the same way in both those competitions and expect the same results, of course, is very difficult. And we need to be fair and frank about that. There's no getting away from it. And that's where I think there has to be an acceptance that guys being lauded as heroes and legends, just chill with that. Winning an SPFL title is one thing. And by God, what an achievement because of obviously what went on. But I think what's frustrating me a wee bit is when everything wants to go back to, even Sutton last night, and I should have a klaxon for him and all. But he tweeted and it's like, but we can't forget how far Ange's taken the team. That's his sort of match reaction. I'm just a bit like, just give your opinion on the fucking 90 minutes now. I don't always remember harking back 15 months of the other manager and going, remember where we were 15 months ago? Like, bollocks to that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just think that's one line that I think is maybe we need to move on from. Start looking at everything from the prism of the here and now. I think that's just fair, by the way. That's not to be overly critical, by the way, in doing so. It's just to give yourself the opportunity to have a balanced view on it. Give yourself that opportunity. Because if you're always harking back to 15 months ago and what you inherited, I think you're almost already building an excuse in your head for whatever happens next. There's been a few more comments coming in. I'm just going to quickly have a wee nosy over them. See if there's any.
I think when you're talking about obviously about the last 15 months and everything else, I think at the end of the Champions League group campaign, I think that's a good time to obviously reflect. You can look and see where we were at in Europe last year from where we're at now in Europe, not necessarily from where we started, but you'll be able to see whether or not there's been enough progress there. Because I think first season, granted, obviously we're not playing in the highest level, but we're playing with a far weaker squad that we're still getting used to Ange's way of playing. So there was different challenges in that Europa League campaign last season. Whereas this year, the players are now fully bought in to what Ange is trying to do with them. And it's a case of now trying to implement those styles against some of the best teams across Europe at the moment. So I do kind of feel there will be a little bit of opportunity to reflect come the end of the campaigns just to see exactly where we're at in Europe. I mean, certainly for me, I think there is signs that there is progression being made there, although it's a little bit trickier given that the fact that the jump in quality in opposition has went up massively over the last 12 months. Although at the same time, I think Celtic themselves have also dramatically improved from where they were 12 months ago as well.
Let's talk about Matt O'Reilly. There was a tweet today I've seen saying he's been anonymous this season. I mean, I think if I'd posted that, Jonathan, I could wake up to our 3,000.
Yeah, definitely.
The boy who sent it talks a lot of sense about football. He's brand new. I've seen that today. I thought, he's not being honest. Funnily enough, Jonathan, I didn't bother trying to, castrate him in public, and all that shite. You know what I mean? Have them hung, drawn, and quartered. I genuinely feel that Matt O'Reilly's contributions and numbers look pretty good. And we're told when we think someone's out of form, Jonathan, that we're to look at the stats and you're not paying attention to the stats. Well, 8 assists apparently is this season or something for Matt O'Reilly. But David Tommy comes in, and brilliant to have you on, David. Top man, welcome aboard the Bhoycie Bus. And he's saying last night Matt O'Reilly was gone after 60 minutes. Does he need a rest? He's been playing January to October non-stop. Hail to you, David Tomey, and thank you for jumping on. Jonathan, Matt O'Reilly's, it's a difficult role, that midfield role, obviously. And we've all speak about the high-intensity type of play that Ange's wanting to implement with Celtic, and is implementing a lot of the time, and he's quite right to stick to his guns in most cases, in my opinion. I think he could tweak it at times, yeah. But has Matt O'Reilly faded for you a wee bit? I mean, I don't know.
I think he started so strongly. I think he's maybe just been a little bit of a master of his own downfall in some ways, because he was so good when he first came in. And don't get me wrong, I don't think he's dropped off a cliff on form by any means. He is maybe slightly quieter. I would probably agree there with the comment that he hasn't quite at the same heights that he was when we first signed him. I'm still quite interested in the fact that we let Tom Rogic go and he's ended up at West Brom, because I think Rogic and him would have been a very good battle for that number 10 role in behind the striker. I think the two of them would have probably really fired each other on and probably helped O'Reilly get the best sort of performances, because a guy like Tom Rogic's very hard to drop, as we found out last season when O'Reilly was in the squad. Rogic quite regularly got the nod in big games, particularly remember the one at Ibrox where Rogic ends up scoring when he ends up getting in ahead of O'Reilly. So I think in some ways he's maybe not benefited from the fact that Tom Rogic has left the building, because I feel like the two of them were very similar. Similar in some ways with the ball at their feet. O'Reilly definitely has more energy, but O'Reilly has a bit more of the energy, but Rogic certainly has a bit more of the finesse. And I think when you looked at the two of them, I think it made sense from a Celtic point of view to have tried to keep Tom Rogic, if indeed was Celtic that pushed him out the door. Because I'm finding
he's playing a hell of a lot compared to. I mean, I know the comment was saying, January to October, but I think you're right. I think between January and May, it was heavily rotated with Tom Rogic, obviously apart from the time they played together, which was no, let's not do that again.
Hell no.
But he was probably better rotated then. Monty's away. He's away to iron his man Keeney. Nice one, Monty. Good to have you on, mate. But I love this from Empyrean Vibrations, Jonathan. Right, this is making really.
That's a name. That's a name, by the way. Empyrean Vibrations. I like it.
Vibrations. Ange's restored some pride, and we are back to where Brendan sort of had us last time. We failed to attempt to jump to the next level permanently. Does anyone believe we can do it this time? Wow, that's a question. This is the sort of debate we want. I don't think there's a lot of. That's a great point. This is Postecoglou. You could argue he's done it just as quickly. He's got us back into being a Champions League outfit. He's took over turmoil. I think. Rodgers deserves a hell of a lot of kudos, by the way. See, when you look back from taking over what looked like a disaster, what Dylan had left behind, he took over that and he polished what we might have thought a couple were turds, Jonathan, in that team. And he made that team better instantly and sprinkled, Musas and Scott Sinclair's on it. And Paddy Roberts, things like that. Well, he was already there, in fact.
I re-signed him, though.
No, I think he was an 18-month loan.
Oh, he signed him in his second season. Yeah, okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah,
it's very rare that I'm right.
I think you are on this one. I'm going to give you that.
Thanks, mate. Thank you. But I mean, this now comes down to what the club want. What the club want to do, because at the end of the day, we've just had the accounts posted, Jonathan, 2 weeks ago. And they're all very positive. 30 million cash in the bank and all that sort of stuff, all that good stuff, you could say.
You need something for Phil McGinley next. You need a wee Phil McGinley
But
emoji or something to go up.
Yeah, I feel
All that good stuff.
But you think, you can put all that in the bank. We turned over nearly 100 million as well, so it's another similarity, empty and vibrations, because we turned over 100 million after Rodgers' first and second season. We nearly turned over 100 million in the books just released. I think we could go on to do that with the Champions League, etc. this year, and it'll then be down to Celtic, really, won't it? It's down to the guys in charge now. Undeniably, Ange has been, I think he's been backed, and I think he's been backed well so far. But again, I don't buy into all this bollocks from the other side that he's bought the league or anything. His net spend ain't that bad. But what we will say is Celtic give him a reward of the player revenue. I think that's far greater than what we've seen in prior years. Far greater than what we've seen for the likes of Kieran Tierney. He was replaced with a 2 million and a 3 million left back, just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And I think you can go back further than that. Anyway, I think the signs are good. Celtic would treat it differently, Jonathan, don't you? I think they would be more ambitious this time to go again for the Champions League. And by God, I hope so. I mean, I really hope so. You have to learn from your mistakes. Making mistakes is okay in life, but you have to learn from them, Jonathan. And the big thing we have to learn from Brendan Rodgers was, undeniably, we got bigger, we went up another rung, and we stopped. And in fact, we tried to almost flatten it a bit, and I have no idea why. Will we do the same with Ange? Will we make that same mistake again? Or do you have faith this time it's going to be different?
I think it'll be different, and I'll tell you why. There's quite a big difference between what the two of them had to go up against to get into the Champions League to begin with. As Rodgers always had to play qualifiers, and he did remarkably well, particularly his first season, to navigate those qualifiers, despite not knowing his players particularly well at that point, to have actually got Celtic into the Champions League that season. And then he followed up the next season as well. But again, he had to go through qualifiers despite winning the league. The key difference we have at the moment is that as Celtic win the league again this season, it's straight into the Champions League. There's no real sort of gamble, if you like, in the summer where Celtic don't know whether to stick or twist, because that's what the Celtic board do. They don't like the thought of not uncertainty with whether or not they're going to get Champions League money. They know if they strengthen in January, I think the fans know that they need to put the money down if they're going to be playing qualifiers. But historically, Celtic don't do that. They wait until they find out what the script is. And I still think there would be an element of that if we were playing qualifiers. However, that's not going to be a factor for a while. Hopefully, with the progress that Scottish clubs have made in Europe in the past few years, that Celtic will still have that opportunity by winning the league to go straight in. And I think when they look at it from that point of view, it's a lot easier in their sort of mindset to then go and spend the money, because they see the league as something that's a lot more achievable in some ways, I think, rather than just last minute running about trying to get summer deals done, then right into qualifiers. And I think Celtic as a board probably look at that and think there's just too much risk here involved. It's not a subscription I believe in personally. If I was somebody there, I would give the guy the money. But I think from their point of view, because they can do this planning over summer, then again in January, and they kind of know that by the time they get to the start of the following season, that Celtic are either in the Champions League or they're playing the qualifiers. If they're in the Champions League, Celtic will continue to strengthen year on year, because they already have the money in the bank for that summer transfer window when they're in that position. And I think because of that sort of position we find ourselves in now in Scottish football, and the fact I still think Celtic are the best team in Scotland, then I think Celtic will continue to build upon getting into the Champions League year on year. And you'd like to think that by the time, like 3 or 4 years, Celtic will then be in a position to actually really start making a regular claim to be in the Champions League and actually competing and regularly, hopefully, getting out of groups, because that's really what the level we should be trying to aspire to get to. Is like, the clubs like, your Benficas and your Ajaxes. There's no reason Celtic can't build themselves up that way, but it's going to take time. And I think the boards are fully aware of that. and I think they are willing to back the team as much as the fact that they know now that if they can win the Premiership, then they're going to go into the Champions League each year, and it gives them that confidence to then go into the summer windows.
Mm-hmm. I mean, well, I hope that your optimism is correct. The final points that we're going to take will be from John Duncan. He's saying no on-field progression with financial stagnation, which is true. We need to up the level of player we sign. And just to tie in with that is what Red Scotland's brought up, because he says we should go out and buy quality in January for the rest of the season to be bedded in for the CL next season. Now, I've got a couple of wee takeaways from those two comments, Jonathan. Now, I think in January we strengthened with Matt O'Reilly. I think Maeda played a big part. Hatate is now one of the first names on the team sheet. So we strengthened, how much for the best window ever, as it was heralded at the time, and it probably felt like. Did we buy that next level player once we got the Champions League money? Or did we go for the same level player we went in January that did strengthen the first team? But now you had that squad kind of there. Did we really go out and add that sprinkler of magic dust this summer, Jonathan? Or did we just strengthen the squad depth further and get almost players of similar ability, or as it may turn out, actually slightly lesser?
Yeah, I think certainly the ones that have came in, obviously the main two, I think, are obviously the ones we had last season anyway. So we're not going to include Carter Vickers or Jota into this argument, really, because they were already in the building last year, although the board did good work getting them back over the line, fair enough. But, if you're looking outside of them too, then there's no real evidence from any of the other ones that have been brought in I can think of that immediately spring to mind as top quality. However, that could still be proven, because I think the guys like Haksabanovic still are going to need more minutes to actually prove themselves. And there's promising signs with Hacksaw that he could very well turn out to be the quality signing of the summer. I think as well, if you're looking at Obelgaard, the holding midfielder we've brought in, we've obviously got to wait for him to get up to speed. But again, Danish international, comes with a decent pedigree there. So I think, again, he could end up being one to watch. But if you're looking outside...
The boy signed on the last day of the summer window. I mean, I hope he comes out on to be, as you say about the pedigree, but if it was that good, you wouldn't expect him to be signed on deadline day. This guy's been
it's an opportunity, clearly.
He's been in no man's land. But he's been in no man's land in the with the Russian team for 3 months, 4 months, if not longer. He was always going to be available. So if they were that committed to him being the man, I think, I love the point for Red Scotland, and I've got to be on board with that. Sousa was that next level quality. Or apparently, not to say that, sometimes you get it wrong and stuff, but he seemed to be that next level of quality, that next level maybe of pay bracket, that next level of ambition. He was only, I don't know, what was he going to be? I think he's went to Espanyol on a loan with an option of a £3.5-4 million deal or something, or a Euro deal. We were getting told in the Scottish press it was €78 million to buy him in straight away. I don't know. I think he was the one that he'd identified. I would like to see that got back. I hope come January, whatever it is we do, that it's the next rung up the ladder of player we bring in. We don't need any more squad depth, Jonathan, do we?
No, we don't really need a lot more squad depth at all. I mean, the only argument really you could make that could do with another position being filled would be striker. I think just given the injuries that we've been having in that position historically. But again, you wouldn't just want to see that filled for the sake
of the argument.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to see that being filled just for the sake of it being filled, though. You'd want somebody
Charles Sweeney says he would worry about a third striker happy to sit on the bench. Red Scotland says he would want another striker at the club, one better than what we've got. And ain't that the truth, though? I mean, surely we should be looking regardless. Like, if there's a striker available that might even... It's there, just sign them because they want to challenge Kyogo and Giacomakis, not because they're happy to sit there. I agree. I don't want to sign in players to go, you're not going to really get a chance. But I suppose then there might be an argument that a potential new striker signing might not feel he'd get a fair crack of the whip, considering the appearances Giacomakis has made. But I do think between Kyogo I don't know, being a wee bit lightweight at times. And Giakoumakis just being, because he's so full throttle, a bit injury prone. I think a third striker would make sense to me. But again, not for padding, for instant competition. If that means a Kyogo Giakoumakis is sitting there twiddling their thumbs and kicking up a storm, then good. Because that means the club keeps progressing, Jonathan. That is the evolution that we're talking about, surely.
Yeah, and it goes back to our famous Martin O'Neill era, where, he had Larsson, Hartson and Sutton up front as part of his squad at one point. And, obviously Henrik was always going to play. But, you've still got two very strong options as to who was ever going to play alongside them. And Martin O'Neill was able to keep people guessing with what he would do between Hartson and Sutton when he had the two of them. So I think, certainly needs to be a case that we actually get ourselves, another striker in there. Because as I say, last season we found out that both of our strikers were injured for about half the season each. It was just fortunate it was different halves of the season. If they'd both been injured in the same half, we'd have been absolutely crucified and we probably wouldn't have won the league. Such was the impact they both made in the time that they played. But I think if we can find somebody up front, I think that's got to be the priority in January, absolutely. And I think I would agree with you. I don't want to see us just sign, somebody that's, not going to be getting much of an opportunity. Yeah, like somebody who's just, doing well, like in the English League One or something, and we just decide to take a punt when we're not actually planning on really using them much or something silly like that. I'd like to see us go and get out and get someone that's going to really cause competition for places there, and possibly even make Ange think about putting two up front, because I still think it's a possibility to do that. I think at the moment he won't do it because of the injury proneness. Potentially is one of the reasons why he doesn't do it, is because if something happens and they're both on the pitch, then he's down to one striker all of a sudden, because I don't really know what his backup option is. If they're both out at the same time, it's going to end up having to be Maeda or Abada back through the middle, and for me, none of that really works. And I think he's conscious of that could end up happening. And it did, against Motherwell. Towards the end, we did finish that game with Abada through the middle, and it was a bit of a throwback to last season. So it's definitely something.
Which there should be no need for at this point. There should be no need for it. But we'll leave the final word tonight to Charles Sweeney, who says O'Neill played two up top.
I love that flag.
Thank you to each and every one of you in the comments tonight. This has been the Thursday Night Forum on the Bhoycie Bus, the night where you get the keys, you can control. If you have just joined us, feel free to catch up on the YouTube channel. If you want to share it, that's fine. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you want to like the channel and all that good stuff, crack on. Just because Sutton, we'll be back tomorrow. Nostalgia, Jonathan. The Martin O'Neill month begins. Filming is the Martin O'Neill month. That kicks off tomorrow night from 9 o'clock. We'll be going down memory lane, talking about some great things. And obviously, I'm guessing it'll be the 2000-2001 season. And that klaxon will be getting sounded plenty more times than just this, Jonathan. See ya.
Oh, so good. Some of his comments about me deliberately trying to cause controversy. Well, I work in the media now, and you've got someone sitting there next to you who's an embarrassment to the media profession. He's an apologist. He's a charlatan.